Io vivo per te, tu vivi per me, carte scoperte, se siamo insieme. Come John Wayne, babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi. Come John Wayne, babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai.
Hi, this is Justin Coletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for yet another MixCon Masterclass. And this one is going to be with a woman named Maria Elisa Ayerbe. And Maria Elisa Ayerbe has worked with a tremendous number of high-profile artists, some who you might recognize the names of, and some who, if you're a monolingual American like me, might sound like they're in a foreign language to you. Because they are. She's worked with, in addition to some major English-speaking artists, some major Latin artists, Spanish-speaking artists, and actually some major Italian-speaking artists as well. And she's been nominated now, I think, on 4 Grammy-nominated projects, if you put together her Latin Grammy nominations with her conventional Grammy nominations. So really inspiring work here. She's worked with artists, I'm going to read off a few to you here, Mary J Blige, Ricky Martin, Marc Anthony, J-Lo, Laura Pausini, who's huge in Italy, Juanes, Kronos Quartet, Nashville Symphony, and just the list goes on and on, Bogota Philharmonic Orchestra. So from English language artists to Latin American artists to Italian artists, she has done a ton of work. I believe something like 15 years of experience in audio professionally, doing mixing, doing recording, doing audio post-production. And she's going to be walking us under the hood of a real mix. This kind of has an urban reggaeton feel. So really interesting track that we're going to dive into here. And I think she has some tremendous insights to offer. This presentation is sponsored by Kali Audio, makers of what I think some of the best, most affordable monitors out there. From their most inexpensive ones, the LP6s, which are some of the monitors that I first recommend to people who are looking for good quality entry-level studio monitors. The LP6s are fantastic. In this video, you're going to be seeing that Maria Elisa is working on the IN8s from Kali Audio, which I have here in my studio too. I have a pair of them, and I think they're some of the best speakers for $1,000 and under. Great 3-way speakers, and she had great things to say about them as well. So big thanks to Kali Audio for sponsoring this one. And one of the things I think is really interesting about this presentation is you'll see that for this whole video, Maria Elisa is working in a fairly modest home studio kind of environment that might seem very similar to the home studios that you might be in or have access to. And it's just amazing to see her doing such a high caliber, high level, high profile work into a studio that's going to seem accessible to the most of you. She's got, good pair of monitors from Kali Audio there in the video that she can trust on the wall, good digital tools that she knows well, doing the stuff completely in the box. And between having good monitoring that she can trust and good tools that she knows how to use, doing incredibly high-level work. So that's one of the things I'm extra thrilled about on this one. I think she has some great insights to offer here. Let's dive right into it. Before we do, one quick notice. We are going to be having a live Q&A with Maria Elisa immediately after the live premiere of this video. So if you're watching the live premiere, join us for a live Q&A where you can ask her questions. And then later on in the week, we're going to be having a live Q&A with Nate of Kali Audio, where you can ask questions about those speakers. Maria does appear to be a fan of these monitors. I was talking about them, and a quote she gave me, she said, "In my experience, these monitors," she's talking about the IN8s from Kali, "are very transparent. They have a great stereo image separation, and you can truly feel the benefits of the 3-way amps. Extended low frequency, even at low volume, mid-frequency clarity, and a smooth, defined top end. Partly all of this because of the dual coincident driver. Overall, I think they're great monitors in the price range." All right, so big thanks to Kali Audio for sponsoring this one, and big thanks to Maria Elisa for taking us under the hood and showing us how she really works. All right, let's dive right into it. Maria Elisa, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Elisa Ayerbe. Welcome to MixCon 2020. Thank you so much for SonicScoop and Kali Audio for inviting me to introduce you to some of my mixing techniques. I hope you like it. So today I have a mix. It is a reggaeton mix. It's an urban Latin reggaeton. Although it's sung in Italian, it comes with a little bit of a twist. And it's by an artist that I admire very much from Italy. His name is Stefano Sitzer Germanotta, and his song is called John Wayne. You're going to notice this is a very traditional, in our sense of traditional reggaeton song. It has a very upfront beat, 808 bass line, sub-synth, and it's very harmonic. It established the entire harmonic foundation. Some acoustic guitars that gives it that Latin, very spicy kind of vibe. And something that I enjoy very much from Stefano is that because him being Italian, he has a baritone voice, so his voice is not very common. Most of the Latin Americans have traditionally tenor voices. And this is a very cool reggaeton twist, which I enjoyed very much mixing for him. So let's check it out what I've done. It's very simple. I hope you will enjoy it. And I'll see you then at the Q&A for any questions that you have. Okay, so usually the way I establish all of my mixes, I begin doing a very sort of organized procedure that repeats itself continuously. In my personal style, I don't like to work with templates. I usually have a pre-imported delay and reverbs and buses mostly, but everything else I built around the track. A lot of the other mixing engineers would differ. In this case, I am working mainly in the box, so I'm not throwing any additional external or hybrid rig for that matter. So I kind of like to customize the sound of each song that I get to mix depending on what I hear and the content of the tracks that I get. This track in particularly, it comes with a very straight up front beat, some effects and little ear candy sounds here and there's a lot of vocal effects, which is very common for urban music and reggaeton. The guitar line, which is sort of in this up and down kind of in between with the reggaeton beat. The solo guitar, which is leading the parts that I described before, which are the mainly Latin spice kind of vibe. Very few synths also adding on to the whole rhythmic structure. They're mainly plucks with the harmonic content of the song. And the vocal tracks doubled. In Italian, they call it paute. It would be what we commonly refer as ad-libs and some harmonizers. And overall, it's very, very simple, but I think it's a pretty cool song. So first of all, when I get the tracks, well, I can tell these tracks have been imported either from Logic or from Ableton Live, or even Fruity Loops. You can tell right away that the kicks and snares and basses and all of those elements that usually would be mono are here stereo. Before, I used to go ahead and split them into mono once I imported them into Pro Tools, but I've given up. I just play with the panning and I just go with it. It saves me a lot of time. So I usually have a pretty straightforward color coding that I like to follow. Also when I am setting up my sessions, I like to, depending on the instrument, I like to place them usually at the same spot in terms of the importance and or the order that I'm going to be working on as I go through the song. So usually my basses will always be purple, my drums will always be blue, guitars, effects and vocal rises and all of those whooshes are going to be some sort of shade of blue-ish, different from the drums. Guitars will always be different shades of green. Synths will always be yellow, and vocals, depending if it's a girl or a boy, they're a change between like light blue or pink. This is just, a lot of people would say it's time waste, but for me it's actually time saving because it's only a matter of scrolling and visually I already know where I am. So that is very useful because it saves a lot of time. I usually set up the sessions myself. And as I said before, I don't like to work with templates because although templates help you save time, at the same time, in a way, it conditions, to my own point of view, it conditions the way you approach a mix. And every track is different. Every song is different. Every artist is different. And I want to be working for the production and not trying to establish my own structure sound to the production. There are people who like to work like that, but I have a different take on it. So that's why I like to spend time with this. Usually while I'm doing all of the color coding and while I'm setting up my session, I am also looping the song and I'm getting to know all the different tracks because I need to locate them in the right spot and classify them and whatnot. So this gives me an opportunity to really know in depth what I'm dealing with, as opposed to just having to like open up a session and be like, whoa, what is all of this happening? Another thing that I do, I like to set up my own, and you're gonna see it's really funny, they're actually pretty bilingual, as I usually go about everything. I like to set up always my markers, because in the end, I'm going to be doing lots of automation that I will like to just follow through different sections, like for example in here in this vocal parallel channel. So it is very useful for me to have these markers in here, and usually I have them also classified by colors. So it's just pretty straightforward. A lot of the times when mixing, it's not about being the most technically accurate. I mean, technical accuracy is essential for your work as an engineer, but it's also more about knowing how to manage your resources and being fast and being accurate sometimes and being precise. It's very important, because we don't have to deal when you're placing all of these marks and when you're color coding and when you're saving yourself a lot of time and also a lot of brain resource, because you're focused on the aesthetic part of the mixing and you shouldn't be worried about the whole infrastructure behind the mix. Okay, so let's give it a run so you guys can hear what's behind this track, and then we'll explore each one of the individual sections, and I'm going to tell you how I built this track from scratch. So let's go and take a listen.
Tu vorresti aspettare, mami, so quanto è importante, però smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini. Io sono diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso. Ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto. Ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero, perché so che succederà. Un giorno tu sarai mia, anche se soltanto un'ora. Come John Wayne in Babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi. Come John Wayne in Babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi. Perché lo sai che io potrei anche aspettare, ma se possiamo che senza farci del male. Se torni a casa il profumo a cui pensi è il mio, come lo so bebe perché lo faccio anch'io. Ti consiglio di approfittare di me, perché un bel giorno potrei pure andarmene. Continui a dire che io non ti mancherò, quando sarai sola nel letto non lo so. Se il mio destino, la mia follia, la mia metà, quella cosa proibita, tutto ciò che normalmente non si fa. Perché quando siamo insieme non c'è regola, né bla bla, né un se ne va. Come John Wayne in Babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi. Come John Wayne in Babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi. Io vivo per te, tu vivi per me, carte scoperte.
Mainly when you're mixing reggaeton, it's really important that the order of the elements, especially the relation between what's percussion or drums, the bass, and the vocals, it has everything else is built around that. In this case, obviously, the kick will have the most priority out of all, because it's really important to understand for the people that are not so used to mixing reggaeton or any other Latin rhythm for that matter. This genre is built for dancing. So it's really important that before we convey technical accuracy, before that we need to incite people to dance. So I usually tell people that when I am mixing this kind of tracks, I always start by organizing the tracks as I go, and then usually I give an initial level sense to everything, either by, for example, you can see in this track in here, I boosted plus 23.1 dB. Apparently when they sent it, it was like this small. But usually I like to play with the clip gain, and usually I keep my faders pretty close to zero or always at zero. It's sort of like a technique I developed over the years by working on consoles and working hybrid in that sense. So I don't like to rely a lot on faders, but I like to build my initial gain structure without even bringing any plugins by clip gaining each one of the tracks, and then adding a little bit of panning just to distribute the elements here and there. And then I start to get that sense of where the relation between the kick and the snare and the overall push of the beat with the voice and the bass, which is mainly what's going to make someone dance. With that vibe, I try to establish a vibe where I am already feeling the track and sort of like getting this body reaction from it, this physical reaction from it. So I believe that is really important. And for the people that are used to mixing other genres, this is usually something that probably they don't even take into account. But if you are mixing for an audience that will have this track, obviously they will listen to this music, but mainly it's music for clubbing and for partying. It's really important that the mix also conveys that. So once I have sort of established that, like that initial gain staging with my clip gains and also throwing some panning in there just to organize the sounds, the next thing that I do, I begin working on the vocal. A lot of engineers will have like a pretty straightforward technique of all the things that they like to do. I am a little bit more open to everything, although I follow my protocol basically the same. But one day you'll see me using RVox by Waves, which I love. And then the other day you'll see me using, like for example, in here, I use the BF2A because I remember that plugin. I'm like, hey, I love that plugin. It's like it's obviously an electronics emulation of an LA2A, but it's a very heavy, the reaction of that compressor is very heavy. So I like it because although it's a fast compressor because it's supposed to be an optical one, also when it returns, that release of the compressor can really give that a very natural compression to the vocal, and especially this BF2A as opposed to other emulations of the LA2A. So for that mix, I went like, why not? But one of the things I usually do all the time, I am from that school where, especially for vocals, it's EQ and EQ before compression as opposed to the other way around, because I like to use, and I am a huge fan of the Universal Audio Cambridge EQ. I like to use this Cambridge EQ because it's super surgical, and I like to keep my vocals as clean as possible. I don't like when you're bringing up a compressor and you're trying to push that vocal towards the front and center of your mix, and there's still some artifacts or some room tones, and you can hear. Obviously, people more and more are recording in less adequate spaces, although this track was pretty well recorded, but still you can hear certain boominess here and there, some resonances from the room or even from the microphone. So I like to use the Cambridge for correction. Then I'll move on to a second stage with the RQ from Waves, which I also love, which I'm doing a little bit more of a color sort of like blending. There's some correction in here, but this is what I love about this REQ, and I'm gonna give you a taste of that. I also use a lot of groups because it facilitates. You can tell in here, Stefano recorded himself doubled for the entire track. Also very well produced, the vocal, very, very accurate, his technical performance, so that helped a lot. If for some reason I get a double take and I am not feeling that closeness or that actual sense of being an accurate double, I would vocal line it or at least do it manually myself, because I sang in a choir for 5 years, so I like when singers begin, I like for them to start at the same time, and when they're ending, I like T or all of those endings to finish on time. Because if you have, for example, with the S's and the INGs and the T's terminations on the vocals, you can get like or so that in the end, it's all those little minor technical details that are more of the musical performance that I understand. They're more of a production type of thing. But at the same time, it will improve the overall quality of the production and your mix. So spend a little time digging on that, spend a little time thinking about what else can you do. Obviously, you're not trying to rearrange the song, you're not trying to reproduce the song, but you're trying to add that extra magic that is what they're hiring you for. So let me show you what this huge bump in here does. This is why people in reggaeton look when they're trying to get their song mixed by somebody who's professional.
Le tue illusioni con gli uomini. Io sono diverso, sono me stesso. Un po' di sesso, diretto, portarti a letto. Questo io non ci spero, perché so che succede.
So it's that extra grit here, throat grit, that is very useful, especially because the vocal is going against a very clicky kick drum and also a very clicky snare beat. Usually the snare comes with some sort of rim and all sorts of different small percussion. So there's a lot of competition in that 10K plus range. So that's why this boost is very cool. It may seem super abrupt, but it's very organic. And also sometimes I try to back it up with another band right here. And I'll use parallel compression, extra parallel compression to just sort of like bring a little extra up front, and it will help clear out that area. A lot of people ask me about that, and this is how I do it. I understand there are plenty more other techniques, but this is how I figure it out. It works, and it seems to work very well. So let's hear some of this vocal.
Le tue illusioni con gli uomini. Io sono diverso, sono me stesso. Un po' di sesso, diretto, portarti a letto. Questo io non ci spero.
So these are the ad-libs, and you can see these ad-libs over here. They have a pre-fixed auto-tune, which is fine because the lead vocal is very well recorded and very clear. With these ad-libs over here, the doubled ad-libs, a lot of people would get super concerned regarding that headphone bleed that you hear over there. For me, it's fine. In some cases, I would try to remove it, but in other cases, I just try to just let the music cover and just go on top of it. And I say this because I know a lot of starting young engineers are, sometimes they get more focused and a little bit obsessed about trying to fix all of these issues instead of just trying to think globally in terms of the mix. In this case, it doesn't really matter. The beat will cover most of it, so you'll be fine. I like to do a lot of automations, especially with the effects. In reggaeton, because the beat is very stable and it's almost like trap or hip hop in the American music. So it's all about the ear candy when it comes down to the vocal. Also because from what you can remember, this song, once the song begins, it's just vocal, one straight, one section from the other. The whole concept of having solos or instrumental breakdowns are not very common in these genres. So it comes down to like, what else can you add on that vocal that you're gonna get something different? So thinking about that in this initial section, I like to use this track that I labeled like that. And it's a combination of a lot of things in here. So the vocal delay actually has, I love this plugin, the CLA effects. It does a lot with very little. I'm a huge fan. So I'm adding a little bit of Mr. Wide in here, which is a pitch effect. I am also combining a long delay with a short delay, and I'm adding a little bit of filter and distortion. So I'm using this as a send. That's why I have the direct button off. And also what I'm doing is that as you can tell in here, what I'm doing is that I'm using the same bus to key onto this compressor. So it provides a super cool effect that it helps you push that delay forward. Check it out.
Tu vorresti aspettare, mami, so quanto è importante, però smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini.
So the same signal, the dry signal that is going from the Vox delay, using that Vox delay bus, it's entering the delay, but at the same time, it's keying the compressor and it's pushing it downwards. So that's how I'm helping this effect just come forward. I don't know, that happened by accident and I just enjoy it. I also like to EQ my delays. I think it's important, especially when they're going to the vocal. You don't want extra resonances to build up because you have already worked so much on your vocal, so why would you? That's it on that vocal delay. This, as you can see, it's only automated for this section, which is the initial verse, which happens before the beat has come in.
Smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini. Io sono diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso.
And then it dries out. And then also on a different section, just to give it a little contrast because it comes from the chorus and then it drops to another section, which in reggaeton is called as chanteo, is more of the rapped version as opposed to the sung version. So I wanted to throw in that same effect, but at a much lower.
Quello che vuoi, non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi, perché lo sai che io potrei anche aspettare, ma se possiamo che senza farci del male, se torni a casa il profumo a cui pensi è il mio, come lo so bebe perché lo faccio anch'io, ti consiglio di approfittare.
Also, as you can tell, both of these sections have a common element, and that is that both of the sections don't have the beat straight up front, and they don't have the kick banging on every quarter note. And also, they have this sense of like atmosphere kind of vibe. So I like to connect sections in that sense, and that is why I'm already using the same delay for both. Now, at this point, you're thinking, why isn't she talking about kick drums, or like why isn't she talking about all the other stuff? And that is because I usually tend to think of all of these elements. I'm thinking about conceptually about the mix in this right where I begin, which is usually by trying to get a good sense of what the vocal is going to do before I actually deal with the beat. So this is why I'm actually talking about this first. A lot of people have other ways of dealing about their mixes, but in my case, this is the way I do it. So you can tell all of my lead vocals, which are both the vocals that are this first track, that is the track for the verses and some of the chorus, and this second track, which is another chorus and the bridge, and then the doubles, which are those ad-libs in there. They're all going to this bus in here labeled as lead. In this one, I have this the Neutron 2, which I love this plugin, especially for vocals. I love it because with one plugin, you get everything in there. So I am absolutely enchanted with Neutron. I also love how simple their dynamic EQ is. Not that I want to be lazy or anything, because I also use the Oxford DynEQ, for example, in here. But I love how simple it is and how natural it reacts. So usually I try to always contain, especially baritone voices, when they go in that mid-low register, they tend to get a little boomy, and sometimes some microphones will enhance that. So I like to use some dynamic EQ in here to just sort of to react to that boominess very organically. This is probably also another dynamic EQ. So let's hear with and without the dynamic EQ.
Vorresti aspettare, mami, so quanto è importante, però smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini.
Yeah, so it's just a little touch here and there. I'm not doing a lot, although this third band seems like it's doing a lot. But in the end, I'm just trying to get that dynamic EQ to react and then just control that extra boominess or boosting that can happen in certain sections. Back in the day, we used to automate EQs, or I used to automate EQs for different sections of the song, depending on how low or how high the vocalist or the performer will sing. But thank God now we have this type of EQs that just ease so much the project. Then also I have another compressor. I love the multi-band. you're going to see that I also add a C4 on top of that. But as you can see, my C4 in here is doing very little. And I like to throw in, because something that you will notice from all of my mixing procedures, I like to use compression in very, very small instances. I know there are so many other type of engineers and so many other genres and so many other ways to work in that. I like to use several compressors, and I like to feed compressors one into the other and get the best out of them, and try to play with multi-bands, as opposed to just having one compressor taking the toll for everything and then just trying to find crazy ideas on how to undo what I have purposely harmed by putting one compressor to take care of everything. So let's hear, for example, this vocal in here. I'm going to open up the BF2A as well, and here, and you will see most of the compressors in action, and you will tell what I'm talking about.
Tu vorresti aspettare, mami, so quanto è importante, però smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini. Io sono diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso. Ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto. Ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero, perché so che succederà. Un giorno tu sarai mia, anche se soltanto un'ora. Come John Wayne, tu vorresti aspettare, mami, so quanto è importante, però smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini. Io sono diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso. Ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto. Ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero, perché so che succederà. Un giorno tu sarai mia.
So as you can tell, again, I'm using very, very small instances of that compression. With a vocal like this, I like to use a multi-band in here that I know that I will have a lot of control, both with the C4 and with the multi-band compressor here on the neutron. I carefully select all of the bands depending on how I want that performer, and I want this special compressor to react like. And again, I'm just trying to push that vocal very organically up front without having to blast it, because especially with a voice like this, you don't want to overdo and just have a lot of artifacts, unnatural artifacts coming from his performance. Then also another thing that I use after I have sent all of my vocals to this, all of them get processed by this chain, which is the neutron, with the dynamic EQ and the compressor. Then I get the C4, just doing that very mild multi-band compression that is pushing things up front. Then my favorite thing in the world, Chris Lordology's. This plugin is just amazing. The vocals, the CLA vocals, everyone knows it. I love the spank, and here's just that added extra parallel thing that goes in there. That is just the thing that you knew that you wanted and you didn't have it. I am also using the reverb and the delay unit for this. And also, without any doubt, I am sending, and you can tell I'm sending signal to all of these different processors, but in very also small instances, because I gotta be aware that this unit is already providing reverb. I love combining different delays. I love just creating a new sound from scratch. If I'm having all of this delays and reverb summed up together, what I'll do is that I'll make sure that everything is timed. So it is very important for me that I introduce the actual tempo of the song to my session, because I want to sync up all of my delays and reverbs. And if they don't sync up automatically, I'll make sure that I'll get the right number of milliseconds that this 96 BPM represents. There are several apps on the internet and things that you can search for that. But it is important because I am sending a reverb and a delay, 2 different reverbs, and several units of different delays. So I want to make sure that everything is perfectly timed and everything will work with my BPM. Another thing is that I have the send here at the bottom, which is my parallel Vox send, which comes down here. And it's basically, I'm using this Oxford EQ, which is a lot more intricate and has a lot more preferences. And with this one, my idea, I really like to concentrate this parallel EQ on this section. It's the high, mid, extra brittle section that will run parallel to the original vocal with some compression and a little bit of tone shaping, obviously de-essing. It will provide that extra push to my vocal, which I think is so important to cut through the beat, which has a lot of clicky high mid content.
John Wayne in babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi, non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi, come John Wayne in babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi, non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai.
So talking about things that I do have preset, this is a track that I usually keep like that with this preset, even from the Oxford Dynamic EQ. And what I do is that this is a usual type of EQ, even the de-esser, it's pretty much fixed. Especially, I'm also a little bit of a controlled freak regarding de-essers, in the sense that I like to have my frequencies depending on the language where they're singing. Spanish has a lot of low frequency S's, meaning that you will find a lot of information, Spanish or Italian or any Latin language, a lot of je happening like that, which tends to fall under the 4,000, 5,000 range. But you will find a lot of information also between 10K and 12K, as opposed to English, where the S's are more like this. And you will find some of that information close to 7K or 8K, and also somewhere around 10 and 12K. So that's why I usually keep 2 de-essers, and they're working in those different instances. And I like to, and also regarding the de-essers, just as I do with my compressors, I don't like to put all of the toll in just one de-esser.
Io sono diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso, ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto, ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero.
So I like to use several de-essers that are working at different instances so that I'm getting a lot of control, but I am not removing the S from the vocal. Another thing that I can tell you, this pauta track, which would be our ad-libs, I decided to throw in the CLA effect right in there. When I'm using, I love L1. L1 is my favorite plugin in the world. It's so easy to use and you can overuse it. That is true. But when you learn to use it, I feel that it is a blessing. So in this case, for these type of tracks where you can see like there are different amplitudes and it's just little shouts here and there and whatnot, I like to control the peaks, obviously before doing some tone shaping in here. I like to control the peaks using an optic compressor like this one. But as I said, I can pick, sometimes I'll just pick any compressor and just adapt to that. I like to also, a lot of things that I do with my mixes, I like to throw in different compressor units or just experiment with other plugins that I don't usually use. I mean, before, back in the day when we were doing hybrid or entirely analog, you would always use you knew that the 1176 would work for this, and then you would have 2500 that would work for that, or a distressor that would work for this. But in our world right now, we have so many flavors, and I think experimenting also makes your mixes improve all the time, changing your plugins and just trying new things and also trying to overcome new battles in that sense keeps you fresh as a mixing engineer and also provides a customized sound for your mixes and for the tracks that you're working on. So in this case, I decided to blend in the BF F28 with the limiter.
Io sono diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso, ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto, ogni donna vorrebbe questo.
So it's just really important, and you can see I've got it pan out over here. So this guy basically he's just saying a lot of things and just He's just throwing a lot of ear candy all of the time through the entire song, so I wanted to make sure he had a special tone. I am also sending this a little bit to the Vox delay. I'm adding some reverb in here, but with the CLA effects, I'm just giving him his own space right in that section of the mix. After I've taken care of all of these elements, which are so important for this genre, then I'll move on to what everyone wants to know about the beat. So in this section, let's start with the kicks. So I've got one kick, which is what they brought. It is very common to get a kick in reggaeton, to get a kick with a clap, a kick with a hi-hat, a kick with a tambourine. So when you are working with that, just be aware that whatever frequencies you enhance on the top for the kick are also going to add on to whatever extra small percussion element is in there. Then they also added this other kick drum, totally different sound. And I added another one myself that I've created. These are actually two samples that I created myself. And I know they're my go-tos, and I'll blend them differently. And I have other blends. If you guys don't know what plugin I just opened, is the incredible Steven Slate Trigger 2. So I have my own bank of kicks, snares that I've created, or that I even I'll hear them in a song, and then I'll call a friend and I'll be like, hey, do you know that kick that is just coming on that track? Can you copy that kick? Because I really love the sound. Because, you know, kicks for urban music and for pop and for reggaeton, those are and I don't care about saying about this stuff, but they're obviously trends, and people will listen to a kick and then replicate that sound, especially for reggaeton. What we call that dembow, which is that boom, gum, very traditional sound that you hear filtered in this song in one section. That sound has stuck for years, and that sound is, for years, I'm talking about more than 25 years, and that sound is related entirely, and the reggaeton dembow section will not exist without the sound of that particular kick and that particular snare. But then other sounds from kicks and snares from other sections are related to what's trendy. So I like to keep my own samples because of that, and I'll definitely throw them in when I feel they're necessary. A little bit of tone shaping in here, but as you can see, aside from tone shaping and my little buddy L1, which I used to just get the clicky part out of kicks, and I'll show you right now. But I also get the clicky, and I love that. And this, I know this is, the L1 is one of those instances where it's a plugin that you can really push hard. And when you're using it in this specific case, I like the way it sounds. And for some reason, I just like to keep it on the traditional view. I feel it works better. It's just, don't mind me. So in combination, all of this, by the way, I believe this kick track, I just duplicated it from here, FYI. So all of these kicks will be my kick section. And I'll blend them accordingly to what I hear from the song. So it's always important to just hear them in reference. And then also, after I've worked on the kick, next step, once I really like the tone of the kick that I'm hearing, then I'll move on to the bass. So in this case, the bass, it's an 808 program bass, synth bass. So it comes with a little bit of a distortion, but I added some more distortion. I really like to use distortion, especially when hearing the kick, so I can really separate the low end portion of the bass from the kick, from the overall excitement of the kick. just helps it brings it forward, and it just adds up that tone shaping, which is sometimes tricky, and it provides harmonic, which is helps it cut through the mix. And by the way, this BX sub filter is free, and it's just a great tool for that. Then on top of that, I added the BX console, the SSL 9000, which I love because it comes with a huge dynamic range. So it's very useful for this sort of situation. So there's a little bit of dynamics, some EQ in here, very simple. Also, one thing that I love to do that I haven't mentioned is that I usually will always have high pass filters everywhere. So I'm just cleaning that low end, just making sure that the low end is controlled as best as possible, because I want all the low end to go to my kick. And right after my kick, then that space will be occupied by my 808 and the bass. So anything else that's in there, I want it out of the mix so I can just wipe off whatever noise I got down there at the bottom and just leave it specifically for both kick and bass. Last but not least, then I'm routing everything again onto my friend the Neutron, and in this case, I'm doing a little bit of different stuff. Yes, I am providing more mid content around here. Neutron comes with different units, as I mentioned before, which I love. In this case, I'm using an equalizer. This notch right here, you will probably see, it's the notch that I am using when I play the kick against the bass. There's a lot of buildup, and I love how you can just see it, watch it, and hear, but you can hear it as well. There is a buildup coming from the 808 in here, and it's masking against the kick. Now, because the kick is my primary element in this reggaeton mix, I wanna bring down, and being a little surgical about it, this overall boost in this frequency, and then I'm playing with the added harmonics and just creating this extra growl in that area. I'm also using the exciter for that, and just blending it and separating per bands, and then just adding 100% to this sort of warm effect, and doing different compressors. In this compressor, you will see that it's a very small ratio, and I have the threshold pretty high up, but it's linked to this external band, and this external band is being sidechained or being keyed by a pre-fader send coming from the kick. So this kick is actually informing the compressor how to overall tame the peaks for the entire 808 sound. And then in here, I am playing multi-band with the 808. There are some other sounds in here that I just also route to this Neutron. I try to keep everything to feel as if it was almost the same bass, although they're different sounds. You will see that I also added the same plugins as in the 808, but I definitely treat them differently, especially regarding EQs and whatnot. But overall, I'm tone shaping everything with Neutron. In this section, there are some drops in here that I also added a little bit more of sub filter, so I can push the into the mix like here. So it's that extra knock in there, low there, and then finally, a plugin that I love, which is also helping me open up space in conflicting areas, is this track spacer by Waves Factory. So I am using the same pre-fader send coming from the kick, routed in here, and the track spacer is just making that small space in this specific frequency right here. So it's between 35 and 65. So because it's very organic, it's very natural, and it's keyed by the kick, it sounds very well. There is a bass mono send that I always like to use. If we go down all the way to the bottom, of this session, I have this beautiful Dimension D, which is sort of like it provides a chorus effect, and just a little bit of that gives like this upfront vibe to the bass that I love.
Ci spero perché so che succederà. Un giorno tu sarai mia, anche se soltanto un'ora. Come John Wayne in Babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi.
Cool. So it adds a little bit of depth and presence without feeling that I've lost all the work that I did before. So going down the lane, once I have sorted that out, it's just basically very simple. I also have a parallel bus that I created, and it's located down here at my mix. I love the way El Rey works for this kind of setting, also because I have a filter where a high pass filter where I can clean up the lower section of my mix, and then I will route especially all the percussive elements to this section. I try to again do a little bit of tone shaping before I hit into El Rey, but I'll have it set up like this, and I will try not to move it. I'll go by ear because it's a very melodic compressor, you can call it like that. I like to just set it at one spot and then start sending signal parallel. And then just see how the compressor reacts tonally, and that's how I add. That's how I send the signal to the parallel bus.
Diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso. Ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto. Ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero, perché so che succederà. Un giorno tu sarai mia, anche se soltanto un'ora. Diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso. Ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto. Ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero.
So you can hear right there with the kick, it may sound a little bit redundant, but I am using each one of those kicks as different, as an overall one big kick that has several, a lot of information spread out in different portions of the low, mid, and mid areas, and even the the mid areas with the clicking. And then with the parallel bus, I'm just making sure that that overall element is just being pushed forward on top of the mix, always on top of the mix. It comes a little easier afterwards. You can see I'm sending all of this to my mix bus. For this session, I have an good old SSL comp from Waves right here. I like to set the threshold really low and then use a trim instead to control my threshold. It's just, I don't know, it's something that I figured out and it works pretty well. And very sort of like slow attack and release and auto, and again, small increments for that. Not a lot of gain reduction because I want this mix to be very dynamic, very bumpy. I want to make people dance. I don't want people to smash their heads off with this. I want to make people dance and flow. So it's important for me to get this breathing from all of my dynamics compressors. So again, with that thing placed all permanently, that's set in there. I don't ever touch it. I don't ever move it. That's how I begin my mix, and that's how I begin adding all of these elements. So all of my main MSD, which I call my master buses, are going to the mix bus. And then, for example, all of my percussion is routed to the mix bus as well. I use very mild EQ and compression just to push elements forward. And if I want to push elements even more forward, then instead of adding more compressor in series, I will send it to the parallel bus. Like, for example, this snare right here. So you can even tell that this snare is not even, the snare is not even making the CLA to move a lot, but it's definitely running through the device, so it's getting that color, and then I'm just adding it to the parallel bus. So I'm putting that compression on the parallel surface, which is helping me push these elements and bring them forward. In some instances, I would like to use obviously a little bit of transient designers, like for example for toms, to remove that rumble. So what happens is that you got to understand with all of these programmed elements, these are close to perfect sounds. So I don't need to waste a lot of time over EQing, over compressing, over processing. I got to be a little bit smart. It sounds really well, but it's not about how can I make it sound perfect. It's more about how can I make it to work with the mix. So sometimes just adding just a simple high pass filter, just some EQ that will help it push forward, but not so much. And then some sort of tone shaping, whatever you do to tone shape, it's fine as long as it works with your mix. So this is mainly what I do with all of the different elements right here. One thing to note is that at the intro, these two percussive elements in here, the shaker and the rim, I am sending it to this instrument filter. So both of these elements are filtered, and then they open up in the mix. Let's hear that.
Tu vorresti aspettare, mami, so quanto è importante, però smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini. Io sono diverso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso, ti chiedo solo un po' di.
Again, I had the wrong plugin open, so let's do that example again.
Tu vorresti aspettare, mami, so quanto è importante, però smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini. Io sono diverso.
So by filtering this section and adding this vocal delay in both of this sections in here, I've just created an atmosphere that is really important for that intro, and then I just let it go, and then this is when boom, the reggaeton kicks in. Okay, so after I have figured out the vocal, I have figured out the overall beat, it's really important for that relation between kick and snare, as I was mentioning, and also the little elements, just because, again, my main objective is to make people dance. So I'll usually try to make a loop somewhere in a section, either the pre-chorus or the chorus, where it's very, the entire beat is full and frontal. All of those elements and hitting in there. But for example, when a different element is introduced, like a tambourine, just to give it a little bit of movement. I love this Melda production, which is part of a free package, and it's just a great plugin. The auto pan, it will pan, and it will pan to a sort of frequency. You have a lot to play with the pan law to provide a really wide depth, a sense of stereo field, and also the depth is more like a mixed blend or a dry and wet. And for elements such as this, it's just a really good way of like adding that danceable component to small percussion. So let's hear it. And it's really incredible how, and I've learned this from watching have you several mixing engineers, and also listening to a lot of mixes, and also listening to a lot of mixes that when I was a studio recording engineer, I then would send to pro mixing engineers, and I would be like, how can they make things sound faster? And for example, with a plugin like that, when you just sort of like make the sound, especially with small percussion, when you make that high frequency content just sort of occupy its own space without having to fight with other elements, it'll make your track feel faster, although it isn't technically going faster. So this kind of tools are really important. Also, parallel busing things would also add on to that, because you're making sure that you're separating. And remember, it's not only playing on the stereo field, it's also playing on the depth, on this sort of Z axis. So I will use a lot of that for tambourines and also for hi-hats, and sometimes even automate them. Yeah, this is automated. So depending on the section, like for example, here on the verse, I won't have it. And then as it breaks to the pre-chorus, whereas with the full reggaeton will kick in, it has again that movement. Because it's a very complex percussive minor percussive instrument. It's not like somebody was actually playing hit, snare, and kick, which would make things a lot more easier. No, this is a very complex. The subdivision is smaller. Although it says hi-hat, there isn't really just one technical hi-hat. You can see it's a lot. There are more things in there. So using this kind of elements and just separating and getting exactly that portion of the frequency that you want is perfect for what you need. You just want it to stick out and provide that subdivision of the rhythm without actually having to interfere with other things. So this is regarding all of these elements. As I said, I will place them. I will play with the panning, or I would just play by locating them tonally, or sometimes, like for example with this rim, just putting it on the right spot, it'll do enough. Mami, so quanto importante. Throw in a little bit to the parallel bus and call it a day. It's pretty much straightforward. There aren't a lot of automations happening because you want this beat to come just straight through. Again, this is not so much as what you would do in pop, which you would like to sometimes play a little bit with the percussive elements, especially the minor percussive elements. This is more up and front. These are all percussive ear candy, as I called, risers, EFX, vocal effects, like for example this one right here. They already come pre-processed, so it's just a matter of me putting them in the right spot and then filtering whatever I don't need from this lower portion. For example, for this vocal, again, another great free Milda production plugin called the Stereo Expander. It works per band, so I sort of found that specific niche between 1K and 20K, and I'm putting a 50% blend. So instead, again, adding more depth to the whole thing. So I try to just locate all of this with the beat playing. So all of these little elements that will come mainly right after I place the beat, so I am making sure that I am not missing them, that they will be there because they're part of the production, and they're marking the different section changes. So it's important that I make enough room for them before actually even throwing all of the other elements of the track, like the guitar or the pianos or the plucks or the synths, whatever there is, because they have to be there because they change the overall mood. So it's important for me not to ignore them. With the guitars, it was pretty straightforward. Again, one high pass filter just to clean it. This is a very plucky guitar. So I'm doing some corrective EQ with my favorite surgical plugin, Cambridge. Then with my other favorite unit, the BX console, the SSL 9000, I am playing with a little bit of dynamics in here, not a lot, and then also doing some tone shaping. Then I love the Renaissance axe. For some reason, it is a plucky compressor. That's how I think about it. I am using the SSL more of a controlling dynamics unit, as opposed to the Renaissance, which is more of a in-your-face plucky approach. And you can see I'm not adding a single thing. And on top of that, I threw in a distressor just for the tone. See, it's just barely hitting that 1%, but without it,
Smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni con gli uomini.
so I am using these compressors more as of adding color, because I'm not even adding volume. Volume is not what I'm looking. I'm looking for color. I'm looking for overall tonal shaping with the compressor, control, plucking with the SSL, plucking with the Renaissance axe, and just a little bit of a harmonic distortion from the distressor. Then I got a further control that I did in here after I compressed, and I wanted to be this guitar to be super washy and everything. So I love using the little plate for that. It's a very simple unit. Obviously, it's locked into the tempo of the song, and I'm playing with the mix dry and wet just to make sure that I am not overdoing the amount of reverb. Now, there's another guitar in here, actually two guitars. We have a solo guitar, which is the guitar that begins at the very, very intro of the song. I went a little cheesy with this guitar. I wanted to sound very Spanish, like Madonna, La Isla Bonita type of thing. But I mainly use the same plugins. In this instance, I used the Renaissance axe just to bring first that pluckiness from the guitar. Then I routed everything, again, small. And then some tone shaping with Cambridge, then further tone shaping and control with the SSL 9000, and a little bit of a peak control coming from this dynamics unit. And then further pluckiness coming from this second Renaissance axe. As you can see, from the first Renaissance axe, the attack is a little slower, and then on the second one, the attack is a little faster. So this is another way of dealing with the plucking. The slower the attack, the more pluckiness you're going to get. But further down the road, I wanted a little bit more control, so that's why I probably ended up just making that attack faster on the compressor. So it's a lot more plucky, and it's a little bit more rounded. And then I'm throwing, again, the little plate, which is that plate that I used to have, some echo in here, a little bit of delay just to sort of like, I like how when you combine reverbs and delays in series, the delay sort of like helps in a very, very small amount. It helps to sound like it's just a little bit of a tail coming from the actual reverb, so it sounds very natural. And then everything, all of this, again, small mix, small amounts is routed to the actual reverb delay that I have, reverb, I'm sorry, that I have as an overall send right here. And also to this delay, which is just a general delay. This one, just an H delay, quarter note. So overall, what I'm creating, instead of you feeling like it is a delay feeding onto another reverb and it's this huge, massive thing, it feels like a very big space, and that's what I wanted. See, it's just like a church with a little bouncy, but it just helps to bring up and separate this from the overall mix.
da un po' che ti inseguo. Continui a scapparmi. Ma lo sai anche tu che possiamo.
And then last but not least, there's a rhythm guitar when the pre-chorus section starts, when also the beat begins. Again, another combination. They made sure that they tracked this guitar double, so I just like push it 100% towards the side, whereas you can feel that the beat is a little bit more concentrated towards the center. And then another combination of the 9000, the Renaissance axe with the medium attack, a little bit of the distressor for that tone, and then Cambridge and little plate.
Perché so che succederà, un giorno tu sarai mia, anche se soltanto un'ora. Come John Wayne in Babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi. Come John Wayne in Babyface.
Cool. And now, last but not least, in this yellow section in here, I've got my synths. So it is very common in reggaeton, a lot of these genres, to use these plugs, which are basically like just synths, rhythmic synths. Like that one. They already come with that delay, so I didn't have to do anything about that. Basically, what I did is just doing a little bit of tone shaping control. And what I did in this one, I did something very crazy, and I did something that I thought it worked pretty well. I am routing a synth from the bus that is with the help of the track spacer. I am sort of using this the vocal as a key to damp some of these plucks rhythmically in a certain range. I'm doing it from 43 hertz all the way to 1900K, so it's mainly the entire spectrum of the vocal. I felt like the plucks were getting in the way of the vocal, so instead of having to do really aggressive treatment to that, of really having to do aggressive frequency cuts and whatnot, I'm just keying it, and with the help of the track spader, it's just making room for that. So let's hear.
Po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto. Ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero, perché so che succederà. Un giorno tu sarai mia, anche se soltanto un'ora. Come John Wayne in verso, se ti chiamo sono me stesso. Ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto. Ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero, perché so che succederà. Un giorno tu sarai mia, anche se soltanto un'ora.
So yeah, it's another way to make room for the vocal. I because it has a little bit of bounces, and then it's not uniform in terms of the amount of amplitude. I just felt like this would help me control. And again, I was experimenting, and I think it worked fairly well. I am routing all of these plugs to another tone control over here, which basically, again, I'm using this EQ to open up space for the vocal. Then just a general track spacer in a very small amount and ratio of 10%. And this is routed from the parallel vocal, again, just to have another send of that vocal that is just helping me control and making this as a keyed sort of like dynamic EQ or dynamic EQ. And last but not least, I found this multi-band dynamics that I really like. And I think it works fairly well. There's something about the tone of this multi-band dynamics by Avid that I just love for these kinds of
Ti chiedo solo un po' di sesso, forse troppo diretto, ma ciò che serve per portarti a letto. Ogni donna vorrebbe questo, io non ci spero, perché so che succederà. Un giorno tu sarai mia, anche se soltanto un'ora.
So a lot of control in the mid and high mid range for these keys. So once I'm done with that, you can see there's not a lot going on in terms of the stereo panning for these tracks. It's just the amount of volume that they have on the overall sense. As I said, keeping in mind the priorities of reggaeton or this kind of urban tracks, kick, snare, vocal, bass, and then everything else. This works fairly well with that, and it's just hiding and playing against the snare.
Quanto è importante, però smetti di pensare alle tue illusioni.
Cool, so other things that I have done in here. Well, finally, last but not least, from the entire mix, I'll leave the background vocals once I have located all of the most important elements, the background vocals or like low harmonies. I'll separate them and put them on a BGVs is what I call it, bus. And then I'll just have a very basic EQ and tone control over here. And then I'll just make sure that I am locating all of this so that it stays within the track. And it is important that it backs up whatever is enhancing in that certain area for the vocal.
Io vivo per te, tu vivi per me, carte scoperte, se siamo insieme.
So something that I would probably do in this instance is copy a lot of the tone shaping controls, probably the C4 and the CLA vocals from the lead vocals. So, because remember, I am using reverb and delay. So I want to make sure that especially these two units, I have the same amount of reverb and delay for both the backgrounds and the lead. So everything feels like it's coming from the same space. And I am not just making it wishy and washy, especially since I'm doing this as an insert and I'm routing everything into another reverb. As you can tell, I am not doing the whole eighth reverb and fourth and quarter note and eighth note delays and all the other things. I'm just throwing in a very simple reverb in here, but nevertheless, the CLA should remain the same. Usually in this bottom part of the mix, this is where I'll have all the different, as I mentioned before, all the different delays and reverbs options. Sometimes I won't even end up using them. Sometimes I will. But I think it's a pretty cool thing just to have a bunch of options already inside of your session, so you're just a 1 cent away from experimenting with these tracks, as opposed to just having to be like, what if I added, and then you start like looking for each one of those presets, and then you was like, no, maybe I'm just gonna do this, and then you're wasting a lot of time. Adding this from the very beginning gives you a lot more flexibility and also makes you think about possible combinations. Like, for example, this choruser, I didn't really use it, but I could have. Why not? So yeah, it's a fun thing to do. Also, sometimes not in this case. Oh yeah, actually in here, this quarter delay, I'm actually sending it to the reverb just because it has a little send in there. So I also experiment making a bunch of mixes between them. And because, again, all of these are locked to the tempo or either by a sync or a manual thing where I have timed them specifically to my tempo, everything will lock into place very smoothly and very musically. Usually, as I mentioned before, I would only work with my SSL compressor, with my SSL compressor. I believe my mix should work without the SSL for sure.
Tu vivi per me, carte scoperte, se siamo insieme, io vivo per te. Wayne, babyface, io ti darò quello che vuoi, non si sa mai in fondo.
So I just rather have a very simple compressor that is just helping me pump everything. Obviously, I am listening to both my mix compressor and the parallel bus right here, and they're all routed to the master. Probably my master will clip, so that's why I have it at -4. But again, I'm working at a level with my speakers when I'm somewhere around 75, 85 dB. So I'm making very conscious decisions about my monitoring and how I have my speaker placement. So all of those decisions are not conditioned by the plugins that I use, but what I am naturally hearing. Then it's when I begin making all of those final tonal decisions and those final loudness decisions. So for that, one tonal decision that I love, and it also affects a little bit of that loudness, is using this PSP E27 EQ. It is modeled after the Avides unit, and it sounds amazing. And it comes with these two transformers in here. And also you can add that 28K band that it also comes with the original Avides units. It is just that extra lush with a little bit of drive. So let's hear it. So very, very mild EQ in here, and then also a little bit of that drive, and adding that 28K is just a tone that makes your mix sound expensive. This is a beautiful unit developed by PSP. And once I am done with the tone shaping in this section, then what I'll do is that you will notice that I am routing both the parallel bus to the mix and the mix bus to my masters. And I actually have a -4 in here, so I am making sure that I'm not clipping anything. And whatever I am throwing to my master, it will be mainly to add just an overall sweetener to my entire mix for once. And on the other side is just to gain loudness. Basically, that's what I'm going for. In that sense, I love using Shadow Hills, especially this Class A by Brainworks. It's just beautiful sounding, and the tone is so musical. Sometimes I don't even go 100%. I'll just go for a little bit of blend. This stereo width in here, the enhancer, obviously don't overdo it, but it's great for widening your mix. And the two things I love the most, the high pass sidechain filter and the mono maker. The mono maker is just beautiful because again, with reggaeton, you have a lot of energy, remember, coming from both your 808s and your kick drum, and you want to make sure that you're not over compressing that. Actually, it's quite the opposite. You want to let that thing breathe, because then you want those subwoofers at the club just hitting everyone in the chest. So using this kind of tools with the filter and the mono maker, it's really important, just not only to make sure that it's just that the right signal is going into your compressor, because now we're dealing with the full master of the song. So it's just pushing the mix a little bit forward. Then stage one, which I love, just to widen the mix, not only to provide, again, it comes with a high pass filter, so everything after 142, I'm widening it, so I'm keeping that locked tight center, especially for the low end. And I am also playing with the depth, which is just adding some perspective on the back and forth, that Z axis. Let's hear it. Non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi, come John Wayne in Babyface. Io ti darò quello che vuoi, non si sa mai in fondo chi sei, ma chiamerai quando mi vuoi. So, because that rhythm is so tight, and I've just make sure that none of the elements overlap or are masking with each other. Once I add stage one, it's just that it's like that entire stereo field just opened up a little bit without having any phase issues. It's just great. Some tone shaping with the, I felt like there was a little bit of information in here. By the way, I don't know where it was, but I usually, and this is really important, will always keep, I love the TR, where is it? I don't know where it went. I usually have it all the time. From IK Multimedia, I love keeping the metering because it shows everything. You have loves units, you have your frequency spectrum, you have your Elisa Juice in here, your left and center right correlation, and you have meters. So you can have all of the information about your mix. Yeah, so it was a little bit charged in the end, that whole presence here at 50 hertz. So I wanted to make sure that I get a little bit of control in there. My good old friend Sooth, bless Oak Sound for creating this, because it's just a beautiful, beautiful plugin. It's just this extra thing where it controls all of your transients without destroying them in a very, very an amazing natural way. So Sooth in this case is helping me not only control, because I'm seriously sending a lot of information going to El Rey. So Sooth in here, and I am driving by ear El Rey to create that extra pump, but that obviously can create some clickiness. So just to make sure that I am not overdoing it, I'm throwing in some Sooth in there. And also on my master, I want to make sure that I can control those peaks and that none of the additional compression that I'm using, especially because I'm getting ready to limit and do a little bit of clipping to gain more loudness, especially for showing to my client this mix. So I want to make sure that Sooth is just taking care of all of those peaks and and that harshness before I move on. So Sooth is great for that. It's just very natural sounding. Obviously, you can play a lot with the mix. You can play a lot with the parameters and how much it actually affects, but just a little bit of Sooth is just enough to make your sound tonally controlled and the overall mix just better. If I'm going to be using a limiter, I like to put the Gulf Fuzz definitely to help me with that. Gulf Fuzz is just a very smart plugin. It does a lot of tone shaping with an algorithm that is just very, very smart. Just right before the limiter, so it's acting a little bit like a dynamic EQ, but it's just responding to whatever program has. And it's just great again because I want to make sure that when I am pushing that signal just to create loudness, and this is only to show to my client because I am not going to do that to send for mastering. To send to mastering, I'll remove all of this, especially if Gulf Fuzz and Oxford limiter, and even sometimes even the Sooth, and I'll just make sure that I am not clipping my master and that I'm going to leave the mastering engineer take care of loudness because he or she can do a much better job than I can do. This is only for my clients. So with Gulf Fuzz, I am just helping my tonal balance right before I throw in the limiter. I love this Oxford limiter. I use it again very, very mildly. I am almost trying to cap it with the output trim also, and sometimes I'll push the gain a little bit, but not too much. So I just made that a little bit louder without sacrificing any of the internal dynamics or construction of my mix. And finally, I'll throw in some standard clip in here just to oversample and do some soft clip saturation and add more volume to the mix so it'll sound louder.
Perché lo sai che io potrei anche aspettare, ma se possiamo che senza farci del male, se torni a casa il profumo a cui pensi è il mio, come lo so bebe perché lo faccio anch'io, ti consiglio di approfittare di me, perché un bel giorno potrei.
If my mix is enough dynamic and enough punchy, it'll sound loud. which is what I want for my client to listen. I don't want him to or her to listen to a pretty destroyed track. There isn't a point of no return when sending to the mastering engineer, because we're looking for that excitement on the beat. We're looking for that expressiveness coming from the vocal and just the overall dancing feeling. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please stay with me afterwards for the Q&A. We're going to have really fun time, and thank you very much. You can find me on all social media and ask me any questions that you like. Thank you again for watching, and please keep enjoying MixCon. Thank you so much to SonicScoop for the invitation to participate in MixCon, and thank you to Cali Audio for the amazing AIM-8s. I've had a blast working with them. This has been amazing. Take good care and have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right, that was a great one. Another really deep dive, this time from Maria Elisa Ayerbe, who has been nominated for something, I think, like 4 Grammys if you put her regular Grammys and Latin Grammy nominations together. She's been in this field for something like 15 years professionally, doing mixing, recording, post-production. So great person to learn about this stuff from. If you want to stick around for a live Q&A, there's going to be a link down in the show notes. If you've just watched the live premiere, you can ask questions in real time and get them answered by Maria Elisa and myself. Or if you're watching this many months or years down the road, we'll have a link to the replay of that Q&A down below. Also, big thanks to Cali Audio once again for sponsoring this. I know Maria Elisa had some kind words to say about these. She had those IN8s up there on the wall for this entire video, and I got a pair of IN8s actually here in the studio that I love. I've done a whole video about them. You can check that out as well if you want to hear more about the Cali Audio product line. We'll also have a live Q&A with Nate of Cali Audio coming up here later on the channel. I believe that one's going to be on Friday, so definitely hit the like button, hit that notifications bell, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that or any of the other MixCon or other great videos we put out throughout the year. This has been Justin Coletti of SonicScoop. Thanks again to Maria Elisa. Thanks again to Cali Audio. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. See you next time.